Hello, everybody, and welcome to Moments with Mango, where life in motion is always discussed here. I'm Johnny Mango, and today we have a really exciting guest, especially for those of you who may drink wine. So I know some of you like to drink it once a day, and others like to drink it all day. So this guy might be able to help you out. He's the founder of Hayseed in Housdon, in Paso Robles, California, a winery. And I'd like to introduce you to Ted Ross. Hello, Ted.
Hey, John, how are you?
Good, good. Thanks for coming on. Ted, can you tell us a little bit about your winery business and just a little bit describe it to us and how it works and what you do? Because I know you've got a couple different facets of things that you do.
Sure, kind of macro view. We are in the central coast of California, San Luis Obispo County, and specifically the Paso Robles AVA, which is American Viticultural Area. And we have a winery called Hayseed in Housdon. We are one of, I think, about 400 wineries in San Luis Obispo County, of which probably 75 to 80% are located in Paso Robles. If some of your folks are wine enthusiasts, then they're probably well aware of Paso Robles. Paso is one of the top appellations or AVAs in the world, was recognized as such a few years ago by Wine Spectator, which is kind of like the Bible of the industry and consumer side of the wine business. Anyway, and we have a tasting room in downtown Paso Robles. We were one of maybe 25 or so tasting rooms that are downtown. Many of the other wineries have tasting rooms elsewhere, either on their property, their vineyard, or within the community.
So, I've always heard that Napa was kind of the wine capital of California. How does it differ from Paso Robles area? Is it the same? Or I know you're a little further south than Napa.
Yeah, Napa is kind of what got the U.S. wine industry started historically, based on proximity to San Francisco, and culturally because of folks that lived in and around San Francisco that enjoyed wine with meals and so on. People started growing grapes to serve that market in the Napa area about 100 years ago or so, and kind of evolved since then. In the mid 70s, Napa had established itself to the point where American vintners were submitting their wines for competition and worldwide competitions and scoring well, doing well. So Napa kind of put the U.S. wine industry on the map and is still kind of considered the epicenter of the U.S. wine industry. There are appellations throughout the United States where people grow grapes for the purpose of wine production. But really, I think Napa has garnered most of the attention because they got things started in the first place. Paso is relatively mature as an area for producing quality wines. I would put us probably second to Napa in terms of stature or point of view or public opinion. And many of us that are in Paso Robles came from Napa, or perhaps the old world, Italy, France, Spain, etc., where they've been making wine for centuries. The fundamental difference between the two is and I think this is recognized by most of the wine world, is that Napa is there by coincidence because of proximity to San Francisco, certainly a fertile area for growing grapes. Paso is considered perhaps maybe superior insofar as the terroir, the combination of the climate, the soil composition, that sort of thing. A lot more limestone composition in the soil, a much larger diurnal swing, which is the difference between daytime high and evening low. Our average swing runs about 50 degrees in the summer, so we might have a day that's 100 midday, and it'll drop to 50 degrees at night. Why that's important is the grapes really, really appreciate being cooled down. They love and thrive in warm temperature, but not to the extent that it stays warm around the clock. But because we get this incredible cooling that occurs in the evening due to our proximity to the Pacific Ocean, a lot of people consider Paso fruit to be perhaps better.
Wow, I wasn't aware of all that, Ted. That's pretty interesting stuff. So, can you tell me a little bit about what attracted you to the wine business and how did you get into it? I know people always are curious how people move through life and how they get into things. So this is one of the things we always like to focus on here. How did you get into the wine business?
Well, good question. It was not so much my intention to get into the business, at least not at the outset. We made the decision, my partner and I, to move to Paso Robles really as a step in the direction of retirement. We were both planning on continuing to work for a handful of years more, but really fell in love with the area, the community of Paso Robles. My partner, she has a rating scale that she applies to communities or resorts, maybe restaurants, that sort of thing. She calls it the MFQ. The Q stands for quaint. You can use your imagination on what the MF stands for. And so when we first came to Paso, we gave Paso Robles about a 9.9 on the MFQ. So just an incredibly quaint community. The fact that we are wine fans and have been for many, many years is also a big reason why we chose Paso as a place to ultimately retire to. And we moved here about, I think, 12 years ago full time. And the intention then was really just to enjoy the benefits of being in a small community that's very wine focused. With good wine comes good food. So Paso then and certainly now has established itself as being almost an epicenter of cuisine. Some spectacular restaurants serving the wine market and wine tourism, which is very unusual in a town of 32,000 people. So we really came here to drink wine and to enjoy good food with the wine that we were drinking. Primarily, we did not come here, or certainly I did not come here with the idea of starting my own label, but it's a wine community, so it doesn't take long for people who come here, especially people that maybe have a background in business or a background in agriculture or what have you, to get pulled into the wine industry. Pretty much everybody I know in this community is in one way or another connected to wine because it's really the one and only industry we have in town. And so for me, that kind of started not long after we moved here.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about what you do before this. You say you kind of were in some type of career or something that before you made the choice to kind of, like you said, wind down.
I was in marketing services pretty much my entire career. I started on the client side, worked in the automotive industry, worked for some of the larger car companies, Ford Motor Company, Nissan, etc., in marketing and advertising. I made the switch and started working on the agency side of the business and spent about 20 years or so working for different marketing service agencies, mostly below the line or targeted media, advertising, that sort of thing. Enjoyed what I did, made a profession out of it, attained some success or achieved some success, I think, insofar as having a couple of executive positions with larger agencies, but knew it wasn't the sort of thing that I wanted to spend my last handful of years doing, and that I was at a point in my life where I was ready for a change. Wasn't ready to retire per se, but certainly ready to do something a little different with my time. And
Yeah.
so wine opportunity to start a winery became very appealing once I was exposed to the opportunity.
Oh, I've heard you use the term wine garage before. What can you explain what the wine garage is?
Yeah, good question. So it's kind of how we go to market insofar as our brick and mortar location in downtown Paso Robles. As I may have mentioned a few minutes ago, we are surrounded by a number of fantastic wineries, hundreds in the community at large, and then in the downtown area, about 25, 26, 27 other tasting rooms. So to distinguish ourselves, we call our tasting room a tasting garage. We like to say we're the only tasting garage in town, or we like to say we may not be the nicest tasting room in town in terms of aesthetics, but we are certainly the nicest tasting garage because as of right now, we are literally the only one of the tasting rooms that is operating out of a commercial garage in the downtown environment. So it's really just for fun and a way of distinguishing ourselves.
Okay, I got it now. That makes sense. The wine manufacturing process. Can you explain? Do you like have fields of grapes that you grow, or how does this all work?
That's a good question. All of us deploy a little differently. Sometimes it's a matter of funding. So if somebody's got ample or almost unlimited funds, then they probably have beautiful acreage with vineyards planted on that property, perhaps wine caves that they've dug into the earth, a gorgeous wine production facility, which is a multi-million-dollar facility in most cases, a nice tasting room where they're entertaining customers, etc. Others, and I'm certainly on the other end of that scale, deploy in much less costly fashion. So I do not grow grapes, but I have contracts with 7 different vineyards where they grow quality fruit. Most of those vineyards are in Paso Robles. But because of the diversity of my program, I also like to have some grapes that are not necessarily suited for our area here. So I have contracts with vineyards in Monterey County and Santa Barbara County as well, which are adjacent to San Luis Obispo County where we are. So the manufacturing starts with me contracting with vineyards to get good quality fruit. They're evergreen contracts, so I've although it's taken me years to work into relationships with some of the best wineries or best vineyards in the area. Those contracts are renewable, and I have the benefit then of being able to buy more, buy less as the market dictates or as demand dictates. I'm not beholden on what I may have planted 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. As consumer tastes shift, I can shift with those changes. And then of course I have a contract with a winery where I actually use the facility, use the equipment, and rely heavily on the resources of that winery to make the wine. Of course, our area, which is pretty broad, I think the Appalachians maybe 40 miles long by 20 miles wide, so quite a few vineyards in our area. But I also have contracts with vineyards in Monterey County where I get my Chardonnay and my Sauv Blanc. Those happen to be grapes that don't grow so well in our climate, but grow fantastically up in Monterey County where it's much cooler, much moister. And then I also have a contract with a vineyard in Santa Barbara County, which I consider to be Pinot Noir heaven. Some of the best Pinots in the world come out of Santa Barbara County. So I have a contract with a vineyard in Santa Barbara for my Pinot Noir grape. So that's the kind of the grape sourcing or fruit sourcing side of manufacturing.
I do have a question on the sourcing. Do you contract in advance or do you wait for the crop to appear? And how do you know what you're going to get?
Yeah, well in advance. These are evergreen contracts. They're renewable automatically because having a secure line and access to quality fruit is essential to not just consistency in the program, but also the ability to produce the highest quality wines possible. You can't make good wine with bad grapes. It's kind of a little moniker around here. And so it's taken me several years to negotiate my way into fantastic relationships with some of the top growers in the area. And mostly that was achieved by virtue of both supporting the vineyards and the vineyard owners, as well as myself and my brand, different nonprofits in the area. So that is something that we do. We don't necessarily need to talk about it at the moment, but that's been something of a calling card for me to get into relationships with great growers.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about how you have you call it a profit split with the various nonprofits. How does that work, and what prompted you to get into that?
Well, the motivation was guilt. That's probably the greatest motivator in the world. I did not do a tremendous amount during my professional career or professional life to focus time and energy or money on other folks, less fortunate folks than me in the community, always using the excuse that someday when I retire, I'll have time on my hands and I'll be able to give back a little more than I am. So starting the wine industry gave me an opportunity to put my money where my mouth was, so to speak. And so from day one, we committed to sharing profits 50-50 with various nonprofits that look after consumer segments in the Paso Robles area that are, I should say, community segments in the Paso Robles area that are less fortunate, and animals. So we support our local women's shelter and also our animal shelter, which is Woods Humane Society. We support a veterans-oriented organization called Operation Surf, CASA, which is a national program that looks after kids in foster care, a local nonprofit that supports our homeless community, and several that are focused on drug rehabilitation, intervention, and education. So we've got 8 nonprofits total.
So what do you take your whatever the amount is divided by 8, or how do you determine who gets what?
Yeah, initially we started off where every wine was dedicated to a specific nonprofit, and we were marketing and branding each wine that way with some connection from a branding perspective or aesthetic perspective to that community that the nonprofit looked after. We found ourselves, though, making different quantities of different wines that we sell, and also selling those wines for different prices, which resulted in raising a little bit more money for certain nonprofits than other. So we've kind of re-architected that. And so what we do now is we do still have wines that are committed to specific nonprofits, but we also have a handful of wines that are not specifically dedicated to a nonprofit or another, but help us raise money that we then use to average out everything so that people, each one of the nonprofits that we support gets roughly the same amount of funding from us each year.
And who comes? I noticed that some of the wines that you name have unique names. How do you come up with some of those different names for your wines?
Well, after doing a lot of field research, aka usually sitting around with friends and enjoying some of the wines before deciding what to call them. And then whatever comes up in the conversation that sounds good is sometimes what ends up on the label as the name of the wine. Some of the names have a connection to the community segment that we support. So, for instance, the very first wine that we did, it was a big, powerful red, a blend of Cabernet and Petit Syrah that I decided one day to call Warrior. Within moments of thinking that would be a great name for this powerful wine, it occurred to me that perhaps we should raise money for our wounded warriors, so to speak, veterans who've gone overseas to do our dirty work for us and have come back a little differently than when they left. And so we partnered with, with a local veterans organization called Operation Surf on that specific wine. So in that case, the name of the wine is clearly and tightly connected to the community that wine supports or that the nonprofit supports. Others are more for fun. I have one called Via Con Gato, which is like go with the cat. Long story on that one. It's a Sauv Blanc. So we try to have a little bit of fun with it as well.
So if somebody purchases your wine, they are automatically giving back to the community, from what I hear, because you do it with everything, right?
Yeah, everything that we sell raises money for a nonprofit. We also do a lot of fundraising events in our space, in our tasting garage. We've got one coming up on the 24th of this month, so we're in the weeds in terms of planning that. So, of course, we sell wine throughout the year. Of course, our wines raise money as people buy those wines. Some percentage of the amount they spend, of course, is going to go to one of the worthy nonprofits that we support. But we also use our space to have fundraisers, which certainly help us raise money for those organizations. More importantly, raise awareness within our community that there are organizations out there that are serving those, again, less fortunate. When I moved to Paso, I was here a couple of years, maybe 3 years before I'd even started to hear about any of these organizations. And it wasn't really until I started the brand and had to find out, who's looking after at-risk youth, who's looking after people in abusive relationships, or who's worrying about kids that are dabbling in drugs in middle school. And so a large focus of what we do is really just to try to draw awareness to these organizations by inviting the community in to not just taste the wines, but hear a little bit about what these nonprofits do. And we do that, of course, on a daily basis in the tasting garage, but we also do it through a lot of large fundraising events that we hold throughout the year.
Are your wines just available in the Paso Robles area, or are they distributed to other parts of the country or anything?
We don't do any distribution. Everything is direct to consumer. That was kind of a strategic choice, driven by two things. The first being that we want to maximize or maintain maximum margin, because by doing that, which is a lot easier to achieve selling wine direct to consumer, then we have more margin to share with our nonprofit partners. We do sell on our website. So, of course, anybody in the U.S. can go online and buy wine on our website. There are a couple of states where we're restricted from selling wine, but just legally based on the laws of those states, in which case we would have to go through a distributor. But generally we can deliver wine through our website and through common carriers like UPS to just about anybody in the country.
What states are you restricted in?
Delaware, Connecticut, Alabama, South Dakota, and Utah.
Okay. So you've got 45 states you can sell in.
Exactly.
What's your website?
It's www.hayseedwine.com.
www.hayseedwine.com.
Yeah,
Okay.
Hayseed wine.com.
Okay, great. So starting a business like you did, how can you share with us what some of your challenges? What was it like to start your business? How challenging was it?
Benefit I had was, and again, this also answers a little bit of the question you asked before about how I got into the business. I started helping a friend of mine with his brand, launching his brand shortly after moving here. And I had a business and marketing background. My friend, we were becoming friends at the time, was a winemaker and didn't really have a business background. So I worked with Enrique Torres that owns a label called Diablo Paso for about 3 years, just on the business side of his business. But that gave me a lot of awareness and understanding of, again, how to manage the business side of a winery, which was my contribution to him while he was busy making very good wines. And then he gave me the chance to start my own label 3 years into that mission. And I took advantage of that opportunity that he gave, because by then I was pretty much saturated in wine and was really enjoying my time doing what I was doing for Enrique. So I did have a little bit of experience working in wine prior to starting my own business. And to some degree, I just copied some of the controls and processes that I'd helped him establish in his own tasting room, or insofar as having relationships with growers and the winery and that sort of thing. So I did have a little bit of a rehearsal, if you will. That helped a lot. But I was not without challenges. Within 4 or 5 months of opening Hayseed in Housdon, we were shut down because of COVID and the COVID restrictions that were starting to get layered in early 2020. So that resulted in a bit of a pause. But if anything, that gave me an opportunity to catch up a little bit because I'd run the business for 4 or 5 months. The things that I perhaps wasn't as prepared to deal with when I opened, I became prepared to deal with after a few months of taking a break due to COVID. So anyway, but I'd also really not spent my much time in my life, if any, in any kind of retail business. Everything that I did in my professional career was kind of brand level, C-level stuff. So I never really spent much time around brick and mortar operations or dealing with consumers directly. That was not a negative challenge by any stretch. I enjoyed learning more about that side of the business as it went along, and I enjoy that particularly. So now engaging with my customers is probably my favorite thing about the business that I run, which it gives me reason to be at my tasting garage as often as I can be. I've got a young lady that is my manager that's there probably more than I am. But anyway, sorry for the meandering answer to your question. But, as to problems or challenges, a lot of what I was doing was new to me, but it's also retail. It's also something that's kind of in my purview. As the owner and boss, I guess I get to make my own decisions, good or bad, and live with results or consequences of those decisions.
I was going to ask you about satisfaction, but maybe you answered the question already. What's the most satisfying part of your work and what you've done and what you've created?
Meeting people. I probably engage with 150, 200 new people a week through the course of the day. I only work maybe 3 days a week in a customer-facing capacity, working in my tasting garage.
Really?
Yeah, the rest of the time I'm behind the scenes doing, working on making wine or working on my inventory or some of the bookkeeping and financial things associated with running a small business. And it's not that I don't enjoy those things. I do, but because there's a payoff at the end of every ounce of energy I put towards those things. But what I like more than anything is the time I spend in the tasting room talking about wine and listening to the stories and understanding the lives, and
Yeah.
points of view of dozens of people a day when I'm in my tasting garage. It's fascinating. As somebody, I'm 64 years old, so as somebody that's retirement age and didn't want to necessarily continue working the quote unquote soul sucking day job that I had before, which I always loved my jobs, but this was an opportunity to remain engaged and stay active, to spend a lot of time on my feet. When I am in the tasting garage, sometimes 7, 8, 9 hours over the course of a day, I'm on my feet 7 or 8 or 9 hours because I'm not sitting down.
Well,
And so it's probably even got a little small health wellness component to it, mental health as well as physical health.
yeah, life in motion in action right there with Ted Ross. Here's a question I've always had about the wine business and the liquor business. Is there some reason why wine isn't produced in plastic containers, plastic bottles?
Can't answer your question in terms of from a materials perspective exactly. Like, for instance, do the acids in the wine in any way interact with plastics? And does it make it
Ah,
a less suitable container if that's the case? So I don't know. I can tell you this. Most of us, or all of us, I would say in Paso, that are making a quality product want to make sure that we're also presenting that product in the most beneficial way to our consumers. And so a lot of what we do insofar as packaging goes is tied to tradition, is tied to what we believe the perceptions of the consumer are
right.
relative to quality wine versus low quality wine. None of us in Paso, except one that I can think of, are putting our wine in boxes, even though the people have been putting wine in boxes for years. That
Right.
has been kind of reserved for the low end of the market, and that's not the end of the market that we're in. We're selling, handmade wines, fine wines, that are as good as any in the world at a fairly high price compared to what you might spend in the supermarket.
So would it make sense to describe your business as a winery boutique? That
Definitely.
so small batches or
We do about 1,200 cases a year. We've been open about 5 years, so our first release was roughly 400 cases. So we certainly, increased our production since then. It's not my goal to be big
yeah.
necessarily. Because it's for me, I'm doing this for fun. I'm doing this for an opportunity to give back to the community, and spend a lot of energy on the nonprofit side of our business. Getting big would probably compel me to work many more hours, which I'm not necessarily interested in, or devote more of the hours that I work to running a bigger business versus doing things within the community. So we might get the production up to 1,500 cases, which I think I could do comfortably through my website and through my tasting garage. Any bigger than that, I would, again, find myself spending a lot of my day doing other things, and I need a bigger space.
Yeah, yeah. So you've built a business that's comfortable for you.
Absolutely.
Pretty neat. That's really cool. Well, I did have one more question for you, and that really has to do with who do you see as your typical customer?
Wine travelers, wine tourists, if you will, that have identified Paso Robles as an area that they'd like to spend some time in, because they've heard about or are already enjoying Paso Robles produced wines. So I'm very focused on those that are in the community and attracting those that intend to come to the community, Paso Robles, for wine tasting or to become wine club members of Paso Robles wineries such as mine, as opposed to say trying to target and attract, reach people well beyond Paso Robles area. About 90% of my sales come from consumers in the San Francisco Bay Area, the Los Angeles and San Diego area, so Northern California, Southern California, and to a lesser extent, Central California. And then about 10% come from out of state. So I focused most of my energy on becoming visible and staying relevant with people that have chosen Paso as a place to visit or have chosen Paso wines as the types of wines that they want to put in their cellar at home, kind of irrespective of where they are, and are reaching out to us more often than us reaching out to them.
Yeah, I actually have a friend who is I call him a wine connoisseur. He has anywhere from 800 to 1,000 bottles in his cellar. I keep challenging them to drink it all, but I should definitely tell him about you, huh? Because I would think that you have the type of wine that he would be interested in.
Yeah, it was handmade. It's hand-picked grapes, hand-sorted fruit, handmade wine. So while we do use some machinery, I mean, I inspect, or somebody working right next to me side by side is inspecting every single bunch or every single cluster of grapes that goes into the fermentation. So, and we apply all that TLC because we want to make clean wines and don't want to take risk or don't want to have to step on or adulterate the wines with chemicals that can be used as substitutes or alternatives to TLC. So if he likes clean wines and wines that are without the chemicals that a lot of commercial wineries use, then he's going to probably appreciate our wines.
Just out of curiosity, what do they use the chemicals for? What's the motivation for the chemicals in wine? I know
Well,
you don't, but
ultimately, the main motivation is to save money. So it starts with just getting inferior fruit or getting fruit where they overgrow. So it's not quality fruit to begin with. But the slew of different chemicals that are FDA approved, I think there's something like 65 of them, do everything from removing odor to giving body or color to a wine, in some cases removing color, to accelerate the fermentation, to accelerate the aging process, to emulate flavors or aromas in wine that don't actually exist because the fruit was not quality fruit to begin with. So there is the potential, for vintners to use every combination of those chemicals that are approved by the FDA in small amounts. And so, if ever I was going to be a wine snob, it wouldn't be because I think a wine costs a lot of money, therefore it must be better. It would be because I'm very, very concerned about what I put in my body. And when I drink wine, I want to put in my body something that tastes good and might contain a little alcohol, but that's about it. So,
yeah.
it's important to me.
Wow, that's very interesting, Ted. I didn't realize that there's such a wide array of chemicals in wines And it's been fascinating talking to you about your business, and it's a great example of life in motion. That's what we do here. We just search out folks who have unique businesses, unique lifestyles, and have them share their stories with us. And I want to thank you for joining us today. And again, it's been very interesting, and I wish you all the best, and thanks for coming on.
Well, thank you, John. I appreciate your time and the opportunity to be in front of your audience. So good luck with everything that you're doing.
All right, we're signing off. I'll see you. Take care. I appreciate it, Ted. Have a great day.
All right. Thank you, John.
Bye-bye. You have been listening to Minutes with Mango, where we hear about life in motion. Join us each week when we have another exciting guest. You can find us on most podcast platforms or at minuteswithmango.com. Have a great week, everybody.